Here we go.
Good evening, everybody. It's 7:01, and since it looks like we're pretty much all here, I think I will call this meeting of the CPC to order. Everybody is participating remotely. Rita Farrell, Matteo Pangallo, Beth Wilson, Elaine Palayo, Elaine Hansen, Henry Geddes, Cliff Reed. Thank you all for being here. First item on our agenda is review and vote on the minutes of November 16th, 2023. Is there a motion?
Move to accept the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes of November 16th?
I wasn't there, right?
That is-
Correct.
yeah.
Okay. It was my birthday, everybody.
That's a good excuse.
Yeah, I thought so.
Seeing no discussion, we'll proceed to a vote. Farrell,
I'll abstain since I wasn't there.
Wilson,
Aye.
Palayo,
Aye.
Hansen,
Aye.
Geddes,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Pangallo, aye. Okay. We'll proceed to the next item on the agenda, discussion and vote on determinations of eligibility. So we have two determinations of eligibility this year. Just as a reminder, these are not required to proceed to the application process, but recommended. And I think we will take the first of these. We'll take them in the order we receive them. So the first of these would be the Town Hall to Monadnock Connector Trail application, which is seeking, let's see here, I have the total here somewhere. It's seeking $6,000 in open space recreation costs. And we're not voting on giving them $6,000 right now. We're just voting on whether or not this seems to align with what the CPA and case law permits for CPA money. Is there any discussion? Thoughts?
I had a question about whether or not the Recreation Committee had reviewed this, Elaine. Is
Yes,
that
we did. We
Okay.
reviewed it this week and we supported it.
okay? Great. So Matteo, I didn't read it again. I read it when I first received it. I know that there was some question about the land ownership. You know, I don't know if they looked at all the parcels. So it's about land ownership, and then I believe they were going to go to the Conservation Commission to talk about, you know, what's wetlands. So that was my biggest question about whether or not there was going to be permission granted, because that would have to be done in order for anybody to create a trail.
Yeah, I know that the applicant reached out to the Conservation Commission. I don't know if there's any discussion past that initial request.
No, we haven't talked about it at the meeting. I just know that there was an email sent to the commission about it. So, and I'm assuming, like, previously don't CPA, at least at this point, when it's just a sort of these preliminary discussion about it, wouldn't it be sort of typical that something hadn't necessarily gone through the review process yet?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
because this is just the determination, like, is it an eligible use of CPA funds, which it is, but you also want to just have a sense of viability.
Right.
So we can say it's eligible, but, you know, I think if we had any specific questions about viability, it would be good just to bring those up so that they get addressed in the application. And so mine was just about, you know, site ownership, and, you know, perhaps there'll be a map included showing, you know, whose property you're crossing on the trail.
Yeah.
At the last meeting, Graham had mentioned about the trail, the new trail, or the trail path would go across Department of Conservation and Recreation land. And I know that any sort of trail that's maintained or created on DCR land would need to be reviewed and approved. I did give Graham the name of the regional director for the Quabbin region, and I don't know at this point whether he has been back in touch with him, but that's another piece of it too, is DCR ownership and allowance of activity. So just to say, knowing where the trail is and its distance from the reservoir and being what's considered off reservation land, so outside of 202 and the major highways that surround Quabbin, I think it is looked upon more favorably than if something was going right down to the water or something like that. So I'll be curious to hear what Graham finds out about the inquiry there.
Great, that's helpful. So it seems like it's an eligible activity. I guess, you know, what we would want them to address in their application too is whether or not $6,000 is you know, is sufficient to do what they want to do, because we might want trail markings or, you know, the trail clearing, if there are going to be any costs associated with that. And then I don't know, you know, Beth, if there end up being permitting issues.
I was thinking costing for like bog bridging or something. You know, if there's wet enough areas, the Concom might say, hey, could you, you know, just put down some bog bridging, and that can end up adding to your budget.
Yeah. So it'd be great if they could have some initial conversation with the Conservation Commission prior to submitting the application.
Yeah.
We have time because, you know, town meeting is in April, and we could always revise the dollar amount if it came back that they needed more than they initially thought.
Mhm.
The one thing that I wondered about, this is going to be behind Town Hall, right? The access to this trail, from what I read. So
Yes.
is there going to be any issues with parking or anything behind Town Hall? Or is there going to be a way of any handling that?
When Graham came to the rec committee, he was of the opinion that most of the activity was going to be weekend activity, and that the parking would not be an issue.
Oh, okay. That's true. That's great.
Yeah. Well, I'd make a motion
All right.
that we say yes, that this is eligible for CPA funds.
Is there a second?
Approve the determination of eligibility.
I second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll proceed to a vote. Hanson,
All right.
Wilson,
Aye.
Kaleo,
Aye.
Farrell,
Aye.
Geddes,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
and Gallo, aye.
Just one note on that. Somebody sent me today a piece on Western Massachusetts Trail designated as a national park. I don't know if anybody else had heard about that, but I can forward it on to the rest of the committee. But it's designated as a national park, but don't think Yosemite, Yellowstone. Think of that being one of 400 and some National Park Service trails and parks and things like that. So it doesn't rise to the grandeur of a Yosemite, Yellowstone, but it is further designation of that. So interesting that that has happened.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Does it pass through Shutesbury at all?
It does, yes. So this is the National Scenic Trail.
Oh, yeah.
So this is what the proposed project will connect to, from Town Hall down to the trail that goes along, coming up from the south.
Mhm. That's great.
Yeah, that is great.
Wonder if it'll make it eligible for federal funding. Okay, let's proceed to the next item, which is the second determination of eligibility form we received. This is for the Shutesbury Elementary School Pavilion. Seeking $60,000 in recreation funding. Is there any discussion? Rita?
So I did read Stuart Saganor's email back when you asked him the question, and I was kind of interested because we did use CPA funding for the playground equipment there, which is kind of in this a little bit in the same category, because it is used by the school, but it's sort of open to the community at large, not during school hours, but on off hours. So it made me think about some sort of pavilion at the school, if there's a way to ensure that, you know, it would become a resource, a town resource, that it's not simply a school, you know, it can only be used exclusively for school activities. And if that were the case, then I think it would be arguable that it, you know, falls under CPA eligibility.
Yeah, I mean, I was struck also by, I mean, so clearly as a structure, it doesn't fall under the stadium.
Right.
The issue, like this is an allowable structure. And it's on recreation property. The question is it accessible, or is it being made usable for the whole community as opposed to just a select group? And I think that like I feel that is something that should be addressed in the application. In terms of eligibility, it is by the letter of the law and case law eligible to me. But there are concerns that I would have about, one, the cost, which is significantly more than we have available for recreation funding. But also this issue, as you say, Rita, of is this something that's available to the whole community? I think if it were presented as, you know, a shared space, there are other towns around us. My wife teaches in Warwick, and they just built a pavilion like this. It was, you know, $50,000. It's not a cheap structure. But it specifically was built as a community resource for community learning activities and concerts and things like that. So I think that addressing that might be, might help sort of alleviate some of those concerns.
I agree with you. I had the exact same issues. And I'd like to see in the final submission the procedures by which a town resident would be able to make use of, how they would get access to the pavilion.
Yeah.
What's the procedure? Who would I have to talk to? If I wanted to have something down there, who would I have to talk to? And who's deciding whether what I'm proposing is valid or not?
I think I think those are really important concerns, and I wonder if, in addition to the school committee, if the recreation committee shouldn't be involved to some
Yeah.
extent. Sorry, Elaine, I don't mean to keep dumping things on you,
Pile on.
but I mean, I do feel that, you know, it's you know, if it is something that is available to the community to use, then that's a different category, right? Than if it is something that is exclusively for educational purposes, which is, I think, important, but also what the school budget is for and not what the CPA was intended for.
Right.
Well, on the same token, we used CPA money for the track. And that is exclusively school use during the school hours, but people use it all the time.
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, I don't mean to bring up the S word here, but in the Silverio ruling about, which was relevant to the artificial turf question from last year, one of the objections that was made to that project in that court case was that it was a school project and not a community project. And the court specifically found that just because a resource that is supported with CPA funding would be used by the school doesn't in itself make it inadmissible under CPA.
Right.
If it is only for school use, that is a different, you know, that's a different category. That would be a violation of CPA. So, you know, if it's, you know, as Alan said, if there's a mechanism by which members of the community can make use of that resource, I think that would be aligned with what the law intends.
I agree.
And I agree too.
Yeah, I agree that I feel like the school building gets used by the community a lot. You know, it's the school during the day, but there's lots of things going on. Pickleball goes on in the gym, and you know, I used to take my kids to the early childhood play groups and things, and they had those weekly in the gym for years and years, and I can see that group of kids using a pavilion outside, and that's open to the, you know, the whole community, anybody that has somebody under the age of 3. So I think it will get used by more than just school students.
So
I don't think that the school should have the sole say in who uses it,
No,
because it would be a town.
Resource. Yeah.
right.
Recreation committee.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the question. Ultimately, it's about you know, the funding mechanism for it. Obviously, if you know, if the PTO and the school or crowdfunding from the teacher pays for it, then that's a separate thing. But if CPA money is going to be used for it, then it's supposed to be available to the
Right.
community, which is not to say that the kids at the school are not part of the community.
Right.
But it's meant to be a
But
resource.
there are people in the community that don't have kids in school.
Exactly.
Those are the ones that.
and it's different than, say, buying equipment and putting them in that in the locked shed, and it's only available to the students during school hours. That's a different story. So as long as it's something that's open air and that anybody could go there and use it, just like the equipment, you know, the swings and everything, it's community resource.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And maybe the only restriction is any sort of commercial use of it.
Right.
So somebody doing, you know, setting up a sales shop or something, I don't know. A shop.
Bake sale.
would be-
Bake sales, okay.
I assume that's true for any town property, right? That you can't.
Right.
Yeah, but you know, if nobody's regulating it, you know, if nobody's sort of in charge and kind of managing it, then,
Mhm.
you know, it could
Yeah,
potentially.
it probably should come to the rec committee.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, one other aspect of that is, so say someone wants to have a birthday party there. I mean, it's not a commercial activity, but
Right.
it's an activity by a group of Shutesbury residents and perhaps farther afield, but it is use of that. And not that it would require scheduling but just some sort of agreement of use of that. And if it does get to be a more competitive thing and conflicting uses, that something might have to evolve eventually from that if it is in fact built. So
Yep, I agree.
I mean, in some ways,
Maybe you'd like to be on the rec committee and then you can be the one in charge of this.
I mean, in some ways, it's like imagining if this structure were on any other town property, right? Like if we had a gazebo on town common or something, or a gazebo behind town hall, it's going to be a community resource. It's just that because it is located on the school property, primarily during the day, it will most likely be used by the school for those purposes. But there needs to be some mechanism for, as Alan said, as Elaine's mentioned, like finding some way to manage its use.
Mhm.
I wonder, would having someone teach something, whatever, in that space, would that be considered commercial use or?
If you were doing it for
Fee.
Yeah.
a fee, yeah.
Though some people who teach for a fee it's not a for-profit activity. I mean, sometimes instructors are paid a fee for, nonprofit organizations and schools and colleges pay. I mean,
So it could be this, who the sponsor is, like the library pays for the yoga and strength training teachers, but it's open to the community for free. So
Mhm.
we'll let the recreation committee figure out the rules.
I'm all for increasing the number of sort of infrastructure resources we have for community building activities in town, and whether that's at the school or somewhere else, but I do think that, like, in the full application, there needs to be some this needs to be addressed in the full application, and I think also the cost issue needs to be addressed. That currently in the determination of eligibility on the second page, the other funds, we have a set of question marks under possible donation from PTO, possible crowdfunding, and then there's nothing under site work done by Steve Sullivan. And so I think a more concrete budget is something that's going to be much more essential at that stage in order for this to pass that bar of feasibility.
You want a motion?
If somebody's got a motion, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay.
Oh,
I move that we approve the determination of eligibility for the structure at the elementary school.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. We'll vote. Or any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll proceed to a vote. Hanson,
Aye.
Wilson,
Aye.
Leo,
Aye.
Farrell,
Aye.
Getty,
Aye.
Reed,
I
and Gallo, aye. Okay, we will proceed to the, sorry, Cliff, did you?
well, just kind of a side note on that, but nothing specific to the proposal, but kind of related topic of budget. So my question was, thanks for sending out the balances for the accounts. And I wondered, with there not being anything listed under recreation, we have two potential recreation projects that would be coming up. How does that work, being the newbie here and not being aware of how funds get designated, moved around, and that how would that work moving forward in anticipation of this?
You want me to talk? talk about
Yeah,
that?
Rita, you have your
Okay.
prior.
I think, Cliff, you're probably aware that with CPA, there's a minimum of the 10% set aside for the three main categories. And then the balance can be used for any of those CPA eligible activities. So the 10% is the absolute minimum that that those categories get, but you could spend, once you've set aside your 10% for each of those three things, you could spend all the rest on one activity. And that's really up to town meeting. It's up to, we make the recommendation, but ultimately it's up to town meeting. So we're going to talk about community housing in a couple of minutes. And, in some communities, they spend, like Cambridge and Provincetown, they spend the most of their money on housing, because it's such a big problem in those communities. And then they spent their requisite 10% on open space and recreation, and then historic. But any one of the three categories, their money is available in that general fund, which I think was over $400,000, right, in undesignated.
Or
Yeah.
441 and
441.
change.
Yeah.
And so, Cliff, sort of further to your point, the phrase "open space," which is the name of that actual.
Say a little bit.
So the phrase "open space," which is the name of that actual account, encompasses also recreation activities,
Okay. right.
which are, contrary to some people's opinions, allowable under CPA expressly.
Mhm.
So open space does encompass recreation. It's the one that I think historically Shutesbury has spent the most on, just by nature of the community here, and that's why it is significantly lower than well, most of the others. I guess historical resources is pretty low too. But yeah, as Rita said, we do have, in addition to the reserve, we have the significant undesignated fund balance that can be used for any of the allowable categories that are on page 4 of the community preservation plan, which is
All right. That's good to know. Hi, I'm Nate. Thank you for approving this so I can move forward on my application. And I wasn't sure if it would fall under recreation or open space. And I thought that would be a good, I had to pick one, I felt like. But I like how you approached it, how it would be used and who could use it and who would be in charge. Those are all real important things to figure out. But all the way along, everyone I've talked to has been like, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And they're not saying like for our class or for our school. They're saying that's a good thing for our town. Like, oh, open space, like there's playground there. It could be used for so many things. Yeah, we need that. I really liked that was a concern of yours. But figuring out that it was a recreation designation seemed like the most logical, and the recreation committee would have the most or some say in it, I think.
Yeah. So Nate, sort of just as as the committee said, I would encourage you to talk to the recreation committee as well as the school committee and the PTO. And I will send along to you, as we were discussing concerns. Stuart Saginaw is the executive director of the Community Preservation Coalition, which is the statewide nonprofit that represents CPC or CPA communities. And he provided some guidance about some of the concerns that come about with using CPA money for projects on school grounds. So I can pass that along to you, and I'll also direct you to some resources from the Community Preservation Coalition that are specifically about these kinds of structures. So you can bear that in mind as you work on the application.
Great, thank you. I'm just one step at a time. I feel like it'll all become clear, but I'm making good progress now. The contractor I got the estimate from has actually put up a number of pavilions using this money. He had I don't know, I'm pretty shocked by the number too, but it was that's what he does. And as far as like the question marks of fundraising, we're getting through this step is going to set, I think, a lot of things in motion for people having confidence that it could really, really carry on. And it makes it much more clear that there's a path forward. And I think people are more invested in it at that point.
Great. Well, thank you for submitting the eligibility form.
Thank you very much, community volunteers.
That's right. Okay. We're going to move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is our recurring discussion about the use of CPA funds for affordable housing, trust related programs and so forth. Rita and Elaine have been looking into it. Rita had some things to share from the past month of work that she's been doing on it. So I will defer.
I did a summary. Can you put that
Yeah.
up? Okay.
And of course, Rita, you will send that to me, won't you?
Yes, I will. I just got it done this afternoon, so,
Okay.
but I will send it to you. So
Okay.
just a little bit of background, as we were talking about earlier, CPA can be used for the 3 categories, and one of those 3 categories is, in the statutes, it's called community housing. It's also called affordable housing. And I didn't put up the chart, but there are, and I should have this in my head, but the funds can be used to create, preserve,
Acquire.
and the 4th one is
It's acquire, create, preserve, support, and restore,
support.
rehabilitate.
Yes. And so in Shutesbury, we've only done one project under the community housing heading, and that was providing some of the funding towards the construction of the One Habitat for Humanity house in Shutesbury. And I believe town meeting approved about $28,000 to write down the cost of that property. So there's a big challenge for small towns that don't raise a whole lot of money, a whole lot of CPA money, which we don't, even though it looks like we have a tremendous amount of money. When you start talking about doing anything with affordable housing, it tends to get pretty expensive. And we as a community were kind of shamed back. It was a number of months ago. There was an article, I can't remember who put it out, but somebody had looked at communities all over the Commonwealth and looked at whether or not they'd spent the 10% that was designated for community housing. And we fell just below the 10%. So, there was a local article that said, well, Shutesbury hasn't, they haven't spent their full 10%. And there were some communities that hadn't spent any money towards housing at all. So
that article was ridiculous, by the way. That article, presented the law as if the law said you had to spend 10%.
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, it was a poorly written article, but I did get a couple of jabs from people in Amherst, where at the time I was doing some consulting to the Affordable Housing Trust. Oh, you're from Shutesbury. How come you haven't spent your money? But this is my background. This is what I did professionally. I did affordable housing work before I retired and took on town work. And so, I worked with a lot of communities that had housing trusts, and housing trusts are a municipal entity that can actually do housing production. They can do, all kinds of things. So a lot of communities with a lot of CPA money have actually formed housing trusts. I don't think it really makes a lot of sense in Shutesbury. We don't have the staffing infrastructure, and for instance, in Amherst, where I consulted with the trust, they would get hundreds of thousands of dollars from CPA every year, and then they use that for different housing programs. So what could we do around housing? What I have listed here are a number of things that are a possibility, including homebuyer assistance programs. And Ken Kahn was here from Leverett a couple of meetings ago. Leverett back now, I don't know, it was at least 10 years ago, I think, used some of their CPA funding for, to write down purchase price for households that qualified. And for CPA purposes, for housing, the maximum income is 100% of the area median income. So I looked that up, in Shutesbury for a 4-person household, the maximum income, just to give you a sense, is $98,000. So we could provide, again, down payment assistance, closing costs. We could do interest write down, or other financial assistance. The biggest impediment to doing this is, number one, you need an organization to administer it. It's not something that I would recommend that the trust take on. You have to do all kinds of screening and income verification, and it's things that are just not kind of appropriate, I think, for a volunteer group to do. There's a lot of sensitive information, and so that would mean that there would be a cost, an administrative cost, to running a home buyer assistance program. Small
Does
amounts.
FERCog help with that?
Excuse me.
Does FERCog help with that?
It would be probably the regional housing authority, the Franklin County Regional Housing and Redevelopment Authority. They have done this, not COG. And somebody who used to be at COG, actually, who does housing work, is now at the Housing Authority. So they could do it. We could work with them, or we could tell them we were interested in this, and they could set something up. Right now, for first-time home buyers, which is really probably what we would want to focus on, there's a couple of problems. Number one is with that income limitation, and the amount of money that we could potentially provide, the housing costs are so high. Like Leverett hasn't been able to do anything recently because the housing costs are so high that you can't find families who income qualify, for the houses that are on the market. And so it's really a tough one to make work. I think Leverett was even providing $50,000, and they still can't make it work. If we took all of our reserves and put that towards home buyers assistance, $50,000, we could assist 8 households, but I don't think there would be the appetite in town to put that much money. So if we were helping 2 or 3 families, it's something we could certainly explore and run some numbers, given what the median prices of houses are now, whether or not it could even work for for families in that income. And just when I looked at the numbers, so 98 seems pretty high. A 2-person household is the limit is $78,000 at 100% of area median income. So that's
with that income, they can't qualify for a mortgage for a house that's on the market in Shutesbury. That would have to be somewhere around a $250,000 house, and there just aren't those.
Right. And that's what Leverett has run into, is that again, even with providing $50,000, it didn't work at that income level. So I think, given where we are, given where interest rates are right now, it would be very hard to administer a home buyer assistance program. But we could explore it a little bit more. I did check with one of my former colleagues just to ask her about other communities like ours, and she said the home buyer assistance is really it's really tough right now because everywhere, housing prices are so high. The second category, and something that some communities have done, is actually create a rental assistance program. And if you're familiar at all with rental assistance, the state has its own rental assistance program, and then the federal government has something called the Section 8 Housing Choice Vouchers, Section 8 program. And that can provide a subsidy to a household to subsidize the rental costs to make them affordable. And similar to the homebuyer assistance program, with the rental assistance program, we would need some organization to administer the funding. One of the nice things, excuse me, about rental assistance is that you're really, you're reaching a different slice of the population, and it obviously can be, can do something, serve households lower than a 4-person household at $98,000. That's the absolute maximum. But that would have administrative costs too, and we would have to think about how much money. It's a short term. You might do a year or two where you provide rental assistance, and then the household would be kind of on their own in terms of paying the full amount of the rent.
And to add on to this, I did try to look into finding how many rental homes there are actually in Shutesbury. And between the assessor's office and the town clerk, nobody has that number.
And was it in the census? That's what I would have thought that.
I couldn't find it.
Couldn't find it there either.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be that the bulk of the rental housing was down at Lake Wyola, but
Right.
so many houses have converted to year-round rentals, and we don't have, I think, other than there's one like 4 or 5 unit apartment building right on Leverett Road.
Right.
There are others tucked away, probably in private homes where there might be an accessory unit.
Or even private homes that are being rented.
Rented, right?
But there's no there's no capture of the number of those.
Yeah, which makes it tough to like set up a program and
to even know how much they're renting for.
Right. The next category is something that I don't think is realistic for us, and that's a home preservation purchase rehab, where an agency actually comes in. It typically would be a nonprofit. It could be the Regional Housing Authority has a nonprofit spinoff called RDI, and they've done some housing development. And again, the prices are so high right now that it's really, I just can't conceive of how anybody could make this work.
That's also that would take so much more expertise than we have. I know that the select board, when I was on it a number of years ago, was trying to buy the old parsonage and think about converting that. And it just was much more than a volunteer body was going to take on.
I'll stop. Are there other questions? Okay, I'll just keep going then. The next category is pre-development financing. That would be if there was a developer that came into Shutesbury that said, I'm going to do a development, and if we provide a certain number of affordable units in the development, would you provide us with some pre-development financing for things like site improvements, that sort of thing, or even pre-development has included site analysis. And again, typically it's a nonprofit that comes in and is doing some sort of a, planning on doing some sort of a multifamily development. So a lot of communities around us have used this. Amherst has used their funds both on pre-development financing as well as development assistance, which is the next category. And development assistance would be providing funding for the acquisition or construction. It could be new ownership housing, or it could be rental housing. And this is what we did for the Habitat for Humanity house, where we provided CPA funds. And then the last category, which is probably not a super popular one, but again, it was mentioned by my colleague, is that that what some communities have done, particularly on the Cape, where housing is such a it's a regional issue. So in every Cape community, there is a tremendous need for affordable housing. And in some of those communities, it's just not, there's no, either the land is all restricted or it's unbuildable. And so what some communities have done is provided CPA funds to another community. So I'm trying to think, I think in the case of, even in the vineyard, I know in Martha's Vineyard, some of the communities, I don't know which ones, provided funding to Vineyard Haven to build some affordable rental housing there, because so a good example is, Shutesbury has no water and sewer. And so doing any kind of multifamily development that has an affordable component here, and when I say multifamily, it could be ownership or rental, is really very difficult. And so, we could say to Amherst, gee, we'll give you X number of dollars, and we get the sort of credit that, and I don't know, I think they can give local preference, so they could give preference to any units that we provided subsidy to Shutesbury residents. I don't know how that works exactly, but it has been done. And I'll just add, so a couple of recent CPA projects include in Sunderland, there was a senior housing development done right in the center of town, kind of behind Blue Heron restaurant, right there. I can't remember, about 36 units. My former neighbor here is now living in Sunderland because she couldn't stay in her home, in Shutesbury. That's a perfect example of, where somebody who, spent decades living here couldn't stay here because she needed a fully handicapped accessible unit, and she was not in one. But, she ended up going to Sunderland, which was very, they were very happy to have her. So, and she's very happy there too. So that kind of gives you a sense of what some of the possibilities are. When I kind of went back over this list, it made me think that it would be great to have a conversation with Habitat to see whether or not they were really happy, working here. They, they built a net zero house that's lived in by a family, and I can't remember what the sales price is, but, Habitat, because of all the volunteer labor, is able to sell their properties. I don't know, it's under $150,000. So that's a possibility. But, I think if we wanted to explore any of these possibilities in more depth, we could talk to the folks at the Regional Housing Authority if there was something that we would want them to administer. I'll stop there.
Rita, that the income restrictions for the home buyer and rental assistance programs are written into the CPA, right?
Yes, yeah, it's part of the statute. And it, you know, if you combine the CPA with other, let's say there are state housing assistance programs, if you combine it with other programs, then you have to go to the lower income level. So, you know, an example of that is a lot of rental housing, affordable rental housing is built with low income housing tax credits. And so those are less than, the income limits are less than 100%.
So is Leverett using any of this for that new project on,
The 700 units?
yeah, the 700 units?
That's in somebody, that's in the stratosphere right now. What I read in the article, as much as I know as anybody else, but you know, they did mention using a zoning tool called 40B, chapter 40B, which allows a developer to bypass local zoning regulations if 25% of the units are designated as affordable to households under 80% of area median income. If they, you know, if that thing starts to move forward, the developer for that project could come to the CPC and Leverett and say, we would like X number of dollars and we will dedicate, you know, these, you know, so many units for, you know, as affordable for, you know, with the CPA funds. But that's a long way off. Long way off.
That 40B does it require like 10% of a town to be?
Yes, that's sort of the goal of 40B is that 10%. And you know, there are I don't know how many communities, I don't know, there might be 80 or 90 communities in the Commonwealth that have met or exceeded that. Amherst is one of them. There's some different rules if you've exceeded the 10%, but a lot of communities, it's really, you know, like Shutesbury, we don't have the ability to do significant development here. Without infrastructure, without water and sewer, it's really, it's pretty tough. It makes it, you know, so expensive. So it leads you to single family homes. If you're going to build anything new, single family homes that are pretty expensive.
Wondering if one way to figure out the number of rental units is to just Google and, you know, talk to the real estate people and see if they know, you know, where there's more rental places in Shutesbury. Because I've known of people who have rented in a couple of the duplexes on Montague Road, also in a couple of the duplexes that are like off of Wendell, like you can't see them on Wendell. They're on the right-hand side, kind of down the hill. So there are some of these units around.
Oh, definitely are.
Yeah. But I guess if we, you know, the real estate people would also, I guess, know what the rental rate is too for a lot of these places.
That's true.
But that seems to be one, you know, like all that you're saying about really hard to develop in Shutesbury, that maybe rental assistance is one of the ways that we should look.
Yeah, it would be great to get a handle, if we could get a handle on how many rental units there are and what the rents are. That would really help in kind of modeling what how the numbers would work. You know, how much we could provide, and whether or not the you know, the rents are such that they're affordable to families that we're trying to target, or households, I should say.
I can tell you, having been a renter recently in Shutesbury, that rents are not affordable in Shutesbury.
Right.
Um, can I ask, for those of you that were involved with it, the previous Habitat for Humanity project, did they approach the CPA, or was that something that came out of the town?
No, they approached us.
They found a piece of land and, at that time it was pretty affordable. And so they asked us to kind of cover what when they acquired the land, I think it was like $27,000 or $28,000. And then they asked us after, to put that $28,000 into the construction cost for the house. And what a lot of communities do, and I'm not sure in Shutesbury, a lot of communities with Habitat, Habitat typically looks for municipally owned parcels. And so Amherst, Northampton, a lot of places have, come up with land and then give it to Habitat, and then Habitat will turn around and, come back. And I know Amherst has put a significant amount of money into the Habitat houses. But that's a really great, the Habitat serves, families that otherwise wouldn't be able to purchase a home. Because I think their income limits are like 50% of area median income. So they're really low.
Okay. Well, thank you for putting this together for us. We're approaching the end of our hour, so I want to be respectful of our time, but maybe this is a conversation we can continue to have in the future about what we want to do going forward about this. If anybody
I'll
else has-
check in with, I know a realtor at Jones, so I'll check in with him and see if he can help us with any understanding of the real estate market. I wasn't thinking of them. That's a good idea.
Great.
And you'll send that document to me
I will.
and put it in the minutes.
Is there any further discussion on item 3 on the agenda?
No, thanks, Rita, for putting that together. It was helpful having it all spelled out, so appreciate that. So
Okay. You're welcome.
Okay, seeing no other discussion, we'll proceed to item 4. Do any other committee members have other business? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
second,
All right.
When is our next meeting?
Our next meeting is on January 18th
Okay.
to address questions from or to potential applicants.
So January 18th, let's see. When is the special town meeting? Is that the 18th or 19th? Beth, do you remember?
I think it's the 19th.
19th, okay.
We just talked about it.
I just wanted to make sure.
I didn't even know there was a special town meeting.
There's a special town meeting.
Oh, it's gonna be very special.
I just hope there's no snowstorm.
It's on the 19th, you said, Beth?
It's on the 19th, yeah.
Great.
Stay tuned. One thing we are doing is the Shutesbury Wetlands bylaw, and then there are a few other articles too.
Oh, okay. Oh, God. All right.
Yep.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on adjournment? Seeing none. Hanson,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Vallejo,
Aye.
Farrell,
Aye.
Getty. Sorry, Henry,
Aye.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Aye.
And Gallo, aye. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Happy holidays.